Hi there, my name is Shevlin, and today we are going to attempt to look back at our year of learning together in Women's Walk and just kind of wrap up some of the ideas that we've been talking about. So we began our year in September. We introduced our year with a look at John 15 and a look at what John 15 had to say about discipleship. We've kind of used this graphic for a year of love, learn, and lead. And so we're going to take a look at that again today. But then what we did this fall is we talked about the marks of a disciple. We talked about prayer and worship and generosity and community and looked at what do those things look like as a mark or a characteristic of a disciple. And then we got to dive into Paul and we saw what discipleship looked like in the life of Paul. Now in Paul's life, we saw mostly fruit. We saw mostly what it looked like in his outpouring as a disciple of Christ, not so much his process. We don't get so much of a view into how he was connected to Jesus. We see some of his prayers and things like that, but mostly what we got to focus on this spring was what was coming out of him as a result of his connection with Christ, his teachings, his way of life, the way he looked at things. And so we had a great example there in the life of Paul. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to take another look at discipleship. We're going to look at it from a couple different angles and see if that can't help us cement a little bit this idea of discipleship. And even if you've been a believer a long time and you've heard this word disciple and discipleship thrown around maybe all your life, I'm hopeful that today, as we look at a couple different angles and different perspectives of what Jesus is saying a disciple is, it will stir something in us to the next level in our journey, in our walk with Jesus. So first, I just want to give you a definition of discipleship. What does this word actually mean? So a disciple is someone who adheres, I want you to really hear that word, adheres to the teaching of another. A follower or a learner, someone who takes up the ways of someone else. These are kind of our key ideas, that they adhere to someone else's teachings, not just listen to it, but make that transforming idea to make it part of their way. They take up the ways of someone else. So I want to take a quick look back at John 15 where we started our year. And even if you weren't with us, that's okay. But we talked about how John 15, the first 17 verses, kind of give us this model for discipleship and what Jesus is trying to say he expects out of his followers. There's a lot of action words in these 17 verses, and we're going to lay out how those kind of fit into our model of love, learn, and lead. So we have remain, prune, obey, love, and bear fruit. These are some of the verbs and the action words that are repeated over and over and over again in these 17 verses. So first we have remain. The word remain, or some translations say abide, is used 11 times in these 17 verses. I think Jesus is trying to say that this word is important, and it's truly what he wants from his disciples. We remember that the whole process starts with God's love toward us. In John 15:9, it says, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love." The Father loves the Son loves us, we love him back. And he talks about remaining, stay in my love. He wants us to really stick with him. Think about somebody that you really care about, that you want to spend as much time with them as possible. It might be a child or a grandchild, a best friend, a parent, somebody that if you get the chance to be with that person, you're going to take it. And this is this kind of love that Jesus is talking about. Just stay close. Stick with me. So this remaining is the love piece. Then we look at the next couple action words, pruning and obeying. These are our learning words because these are the words that are causing change or transformation in us. As we learn more about and from Jesus, we automatically start to obey. Because remember, we're adhering to his ways. We are making his ways our own. So we start to obey what he says. We walk like he walked. We act like he acted. And so we obey what Jesus has asked us to do, because we know and we trust that what Jesus asks us to do is for our best. And Jesus says that if you love me, you'll obey what I command. We also have the pruning part, which is not our favorite part. We don't like things to be cut back, to be stripped away, but it's such a necessary part of the growth. If you know anything about gardening or flowers, there are times the plant has to be pruned. It has to be cut back, even when it's still producing, because it makes room for new and more growth. And so we have this part of discipleship where things have to get cut back. The dead parts have to be stripped away. Our old self has to be replaced by new growth. And that part can be painful. But as we're learning from Jesus, we submit to that part. I feel like I'm in a season of pruning. There are things that I'm having to let go, things that are being stripped, and it's not fun. But I do trust my gardener, and I trust that he is working in me and growing in me, and in the painful process, he's making way for new life to come out. Then we have our last couple of verbs, loving and bearing fruit. And this is the lead part of our circle, because this is this outpouring that as we become like Christ, we're naturally overflowing to other people. First, it's a love with Jesus, then it's a learning and it's a growing, and then it's an outpouring, right? And so over and over again, we're reminded that being a follower of Jesus means we love others. It's a clear mark of a disciple to show love to others. And Jesus says it again in John 15. You have to love others. And then he talks about bearing fruit. As we're connected to the vine, we're connected to the plant, we will naturally bear fruit. We can't bear fruit if we're off on our own, but if we're connected to the source, the fruit will come. So as we remain, the fruit gets produced. Bearing fruit is mentioned 8 times in these 17 verses. I think Jesus is trying to make a point. I think he is saying it's important. And as long as you stay connected, you will be bearing fruit. A couple other things I want us to see about what Jesus has to say about his disciples. I looked up the word disciple just to see where it's mentioned in the Bible. In most places, it's referring in the narrative of the disciples did this, or the disciples said that. But I wanted to see where Jesus used the word disciple and what he had to say about them. So John 13:35, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Jesus is saying his disciples will love, and it will be their primary marker. John 8:31, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Obey. Those who obey my commands are my disciples. Luke 14:26 and 27. If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. He's talking about sacrifice. He's talking about releasing our old way, our old selves, and getting rid of what was and following him in a sacrificial way. Matthew 10:42, if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these because he is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. Again, he's talking about love, but he's talking about compassion. He's talking about service. So just a few extra things that Jesus says as he's defining what a disciple is in his own words. So I want to look at another snapshot of discipleship coming from Matthew 4. And this is where Jesus is calling some of his first disciples. Here's what he says in Matthew 4:19. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. This simple phrase shows us exactly what Jesus expects of his disciples. Come follow. That's that call to love, to remain. Come follow, come be with me. So that is that loving piece, the remaining idea that we see from John 15. I will make. He's talking about a transformation. I will change you. I will make you into something new, into something different. And it is by his work, not our efforts. But that's that piece of pruning, obeying. That's the learning piece. That piece of Jesus will make us into something new. And then finally, fishers of men. That's the lead part, where what we have gained, what we've learned from Jesus pours out into others. And it turns into loving others, to bearing fruit, to calling others to come walk this walk with Jesus. So I want to look at this same calling of the disciples, but from a different passage. I like the Matthew 4:19 because I like the simplicity of that phrase. Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. But I want to look at a few more details from that same encounter that comes from Luke 5. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, with the people crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And here's the part I want us to clue in on, verse 4. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Jesus is asking Simon to put out into deeper water. And this is Jesus' call for us. Go deeper, go farther, come with me, and let's go a little farther together. I think sometimes it's easy for us to get comfortable right where we are, or we do all of the things like go to Bible study, and we're getting a transfer of information, and we feel like we're being a disciple. But until we adhere, we connect ourselves closely to what Jesus is saying and how he's walking and how he's living, the transfer of information doesn't matter. And when Jesus says, go to deeper water, don't stay where you've been month after month, year after year. Come deeper with me. And this didn't make sense to Simon because he'd been in deeper water, he'd been fishing all night, but he was calling him to trust him in new and more profound ways. Many, many years ago, I was an elementary school teacher, and I felt like I was supposed to leave my job. I had no plans for what was next. I didn't have another job lined up, and it felt absurd to leave behind a steady job. This is what I had my degree in, and yet I knew I was supposed to leave that job. There was a call to go deeper. I didn't even know what that meant yet, but I had to leave behind what made sense. I had to leave behind what I knew. I had to take a big step of faith and of trust to leave that job. So then we look at the next verse in Luke 5:5. Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." This is the key response for a disciple of Christ, that we would say, because you say so. It doesn't always make sense to us. It might be uncomfortable, it might be hard, it might be painful, but we trust our master and we say, because you say so, and we show our obedience. What happened after I left my job as a teacher? I had no idea what I was going to do next. I was offered a job at church to be the junior high director. Could not have imagined that was coming in a million years, and didn't want to say yes. I didn't think I was qualified. It sounded scary and hard and out of my league, and yet I felt like I was supposed to say yes. And so I said, because you say so. You've pulled me into this deep water. I don't know what we're doing here, but because you say so. And that step, that open door, has led to so many opportunities, so many things that I would have never imagined God would bring my way. But I had to say yes, and I had to obey what he was asking. So the next part is we have all this abundance of fish pouring into the boat, and the boats are about to sink. And then in Luke 5:8, when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." So Simon chooses to obey this call to go out deep, the call to let down the nets. And the miracle is not about the fish. The miracle is about the transformation of Simon, because that's what Jesus is after. He's after our hearts. And while it might look like a physical blessing, it might look like something we can see and touch with our eyes, the miracle is how Simon responds. There's a repentance, there's a desire for change, for transformation. And that is what Jesus is after. So as we look at this idea of discipleship, we see the same call and in different words: to love, to learn, to lead. Come, follow me. I will make you fishers of men. Put out into deeper water. And we want always for our response to be, I will remain, I will obey, I will submit to the pruning, I will love others, I will bear fruit. And our response every time Jesus calls, every time he pulls us, every time he says to us, go to deeper water, we want our heart's response to be, because you say so, I will do it, I will obey. And the miracle that occurs won't be what happens next. It will be the transformation of our own hearts. This is the work of discipleship: adhering to another person's way, to walking their way and making Jesus' way our way. God bless you.